Hey friends, Bethany Bravery. Welcome back to another episode of the Bringing Her Hope podcast. We have a treat today. I have my new friend and guest, Andi Buerger. Andi, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me, Bethany. It's a real honor.
Absolutely. Why don't you share with our friends a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Currently, I am founder and chair of Voices Against Trafficking, and we are a collective unit of people, organizations, legislators, law enforcement, all gathered together to be as one voice against the human trafficking epidemic that we have.
That is awesome. And today we're going to be talking about your rescue from human trafficking. And I know it's sometimes if we're from the United States, I know people listen from all over the world, but I think we can get under the impression that this couldn't happen in our neck of the woods. And so to be able to hear your story, to hear what you have journeyed through, we so appreciate your vulnerability in that. Just a reminder, this is an episode that if you have little ears around, you probably want to make sure that you have some headphones in or earbuds. But Andi, go ahead and take us on this journey.
Sure, absolutely. Well, before there ever was a term called human trafficking, I was actually trafficked from 6 months old to 17 years old by family members, all immediate, and a few extended. And along with that came, severe abuse, physical, mental, emotional, all the things that go with people that just are not kind and are very evil. That's all I can really say. But, in those days, in the early 60s and 70s, there just wasn't any place. Nobody even talked about human trafficking, child abuse, let alone organized child abuse. And so at the age of 5, things were so bad. I was so broken and I just really didn't know what else to do. And I cried out, for help, hoping someone would rescue me. And there just wasn't anyone. So I went to the curb of my house and I thought, my birth mother tells me every day that she can take my life anytime she wants. She was the primary sexual predator, primary abuser, the orchestrator of what I call all things evil in that household. And so I thought, well, I'll just kill myself. I'll just run out in front of a car, and then it'll be over and I'll be at peace and, I won't have to go back into that house. And that's really where God met me, because I know a lot of people think, oh, God doesn't talk to kids, but yes, he does, because I wouldn't be here if he didn't.
Yeah.
As I sat there, I was looking at this huge, blue sky thinking, wow, it's so big. It's so huge. I wonder who made it? How far does it go? Is there somebody more powerful, somebody bigger than the people who hurt me?
Yeah.
And so they're just, that was a pretty busy street usually, but no cars were coming. And as I looked into that sky, Bethany, in my heart, I heard this voice that said, this is not the plan I have for you. Suicide is not the answer. I don't even know how I would have known that word. Yes. So I know that God had a plan in using that. And so no cars came by, and I walked up to we had a very long, curvy driveway, walked up to the garage, and I just said to this voice, I said, if you keep me alive, I'll do whatever you call me to do. Now, obviously I didn't know, how hard and how painful and how long that road would be, because the last time my birth mother tried to kill me, I was 17. So it was a very hideous childhood, and yet God was still there. And I did try a couple more times to take my life when the abuse was so bad. I would cry out to him to just let me die. Please let them kill me tonight. Let it just be over.
Wow.
And yet, there were always those moments of what I call grace. And then that was the first part of my life. And finally, I went to college, and that was the first break I had that I could get away. And that's where we started.
Goodness. So it sounds like you had a personal relationship with Jesus at a fairly young age. How were you able to really take your past and not allow that to dictate your future?
Right. That's a great question. And a lot of people ask that. Well, and I think part of it is somehow I knew that even with all that evil, that people could do good or they could do evil. And God made it clear to me that he did not design that. That was not his choice. But he gave people free will. And again, they can use it for bad or they can use it for good. And I knew somehow at that early age, it wasn't God doing that. So somehow I was taken to church, and that's where I made my first commitment to the Lord, received Jesus as my personal savior. And because I had trust issues, I kept asking him to come into my heart, probably 3 or 50 times, right? And finally one day, I think it was 8 or 9, I said, okay, I'm just going to trust that you're there. And so anyway, as that progressed, I leaned into that, but it was challenging when you have the people that are supposed to love you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Not only that, they make you an example of everything wrong in their life, everything that, you're the problem. I was told I was a mistake, and they would just laugh about how they couldn't return me. And, I was stupid. I was all of these horrible names. And yet somehow I just believed that there was a purpose and a plan.
Yeah.
And so I school and, music were kind of my second salvations. I leaned into school, and I leaned into anything that took me away from that. If somebody had a job for me, as little as 11, I would do it just to get out of the house. So the rescue, I say the rescue began that day on the curb, where God met me. But the actual leaving and getting on with life, when I got to college and I started realizing that I had a lot of bad self-talk, a lot of fears, a lot of things. And I just distanced myself from people. I would run as hard and as far away from relational closeness as I could. And so with all of that, I finished college in 3 years, and I was that overachiever, peacemaker, do everything. I was so driven. I'm exhausted thinking about what I did, because I could never do that now, 6 decades later. But I did that, and then I took a year, and there was still some connection with my birth family, because again, in that culture, I didn't have anyone to really tell. I didn't have any place to go to, which is probably what primed the pump for what I've been doing the last, 14 years. But I just became that person that you couldn't touch emotionally.
So what has, the healing journey look like for you? How have you, did you have to go through times of wrestling with the Lord on forgiving all of those people that hurt you? Forgiving even yourself, just for not for any actions that you made, just forgiving yourself for maybe not having the grace for yourself, or, having to overachieve or people please or whatever it was to try to earn that identity. What does that healing process look like for you?
I think at that time, one, I had a very blind faith, a very simple faith. I tell people I'm not simple-minded, I'm simple-hearted. God loved me. I loved him back to the best of my ability, not really knowing the experiential love of God at that time. So as I progressed into business and went through law school and all of that, the process was more, if I'm successful, then I'm good, and I will figure this out somehow.
Yeah.
And so just after law school, I married my ex-husband, who was a worship leader and a church person. And unfortunately, it was a very dark and abusive marriage, and not what God designed. But I wanted so desperately to be loved, to have, the little house, the little car, the little marriage, all of the things that looked normal to me on the outside. And we were both codependent. I hadn't gone to counseling at that time, but I did very quickly after we were married. There were some things that happened, and I had to get to counseling, because suddenly all these memories and pictures and shadows in my life were coming out faster than I could handle. My ex-husband was pressuring me, and there was just a lot of things going on, because the only thing I could control was who I gave my body to. So I never did that before I got married.
Wow.
So then my experience is now devastating and horrific because of abuse that was involved with that. And now I'm in this marriage, and I'm like, but I promised God I would stay in my marriage. I promised, I have to do this. So as I went through counseling, it took about 3 years. And one of the great things my counselor told me, she wasn't a Christian, but she was a great lady. And so people think, oh, well, you have to go to a Christian. You go to whoever God brings in your path, because
Yeah.
that is what is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And she loved faith. She wasn't against it. But what she said was, Andi, if we're here more than, 3 years, it was very complicated with all the people involved in the abuses I endured. Then either I'm not doing my job or you're not doing the work. And so
ouch, mic drop. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was like right off the bat. And I thought that's kind of how we are spiritually, right? God always does his end. He always holds up his end, but sometimes we're not doing the work.
So true.
And so after that, there was divorce, which was very difficult. I moved up to Oregon, new start, new life, had no clue, how to live on my own, really. And then I had a great job. And that's where God, he moved me here because he knew what was going to happen. He knew what I needed, even though it looked devastating. And one of us was still trying to save the marriage. That was me. But it takes two to make any relationship work.
It does.
Two of us, it takes God and one of us or all of us. And it takes, two humans in any partnership to make it work.
So true.
So I learned a lot in counseling, but what I mostly learned, Bethany, and this was a huge turning point, and maybe this will help some folks that are listening and viewing. I was taken to a little chapel service in a place called the Little Chapel in Los Angeles. And I was just in so much emotional, mental pain. The divorce hadn't quite resolved itself yet. And the only two seats in that whole place were right up front. So I had to go sit up front in front of the speaker. And don't you know that for 2 hours, that woman spoke directly to my heart. And I was just weeping the whole time. And a lot of it was about how, God loves you and he hears our cries, things like that. But for me, I was so brokenhearted. I was so broken.
Yeah.
In so many places. And I was in a relationship, ending a relationship that was not at all what I thought marriage and, all that would be. And so at the end, though, the woman came down from the podium and she sat next to me. And all she did, Bethany, was put her arms around me. And she started rocking me very gently, kind of back and forth. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions. She just put me in her arms. And I remember thinking, and I was probably 31 at the time, I thought, wow, this must be what it's like when a mother comforts her child.
Oh, yeah.
And I had never known that. I didn't had any clue. And then in that moment, I felt Jesus's arms around me, and I finally experienced God.
Yeah.
I didn't just know blind faith. I trust you. I love you. Whatever you say, it's all good. I didn't ask him why. You mentioned that earlier, and it didn't occur to me to ask God why. I just had that blind trust.
Yeah.
And now I had an experience. And so I drove away that day, and I'm like, I am sure people on the freeway can see this huge light in my car, right? Because
am I not glowing?
It was so bright and white and warm. And for like 3 days, I had that. And I suddenly got that there is a real love out there. And I wondered why people didn't do that. We're so busy telling each other what to do and how to do it and where to do it and how, this church does that or that church does that. But what about just the everyday sit, listen, and be still, right? And so after that, I did well in business. I had my ups and downs after the divorce. And then God in his mercy and grace taught me so much about being my provider, my comforter, my friend, all of those things you hear about in church.
Yep.
But if the people in your life have broken that trust, broken your heart, broken that love, it's very difficult. And the one thing that I remember very clearly is God telling me that I needed to let go and forgive those who had hurt me. And that was a tough one.
I was just going to say, how are you feeling with that one? How's that feeling?
I'm like,
everyone's listening and watching and they're like, okay, that's fine. This is all great. Wait a minute. Forgiveness. Hold on. I'm not exactly sure if I'm comfortable with that one.
Exactly. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. But I thought, okay, you know what, Lord, you don't ask anything of me. It's the least I can do
Mm.
for you to be obedient and to honor, and not realizing the benefit I would have. But basically, I prayed into it, and the first person I would be led to forgive, I said, Lord, you have to do this through me, because I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to do. I don't want to do it, But if that's what has to happen, then you're going to have to do it through me, because there's no way I would forgive these people. And
Mhm.
so he did, one by one. My birth father, my birth mother. Some of them took a little longer because I was maybe wrestling a little bit, with the process.
That is such a good point. I think sometimes people think when we have to choose forgiveness, it's like a one-time shot, but it can be a daily, it could be by the second, it could be by the minute of just,
Absolutely.
I'm going to choose this. And sometimes I think it's even, Lord, help me, but I'm feeling like I'm faking it until I'm making it, until you allow that to marinate in our hearts. That's so
Exactly. That's exactly it. You're right. And I know with my birth father, it took me a whole 4 days. I just had to keep pounding in, okay, let go, forgive, let God. Because when you think about it, one of the examples I use with the kids we've rescued is, if your hands are clenched,
Mhm.
okay, then you
Yep.
can't receive. But if you open them up and release,
Yes.
okay,
Yep.
then God's blessings can fill your heart, your mind, your soul, whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that you still don't have the pain, which is,
Right.
as I just learned recently, actually, we need to deal with the pain from that forgiveness.
Mm.
So even if I forgive, say, you for something,
Yeah.
your debt is now my debt. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful to Joseph Dalton, because he made that so clear to me recently. And he explained that you still have that pain. Okay, so if you don't deal with that pain, and then something else down the road comes and you forgive it, so you're stacking up all this pain that you haven't dealt, you've forgiven, but you still have to really work through the hurt, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
It totally
And
makes
so, yeah, so I hadn't done that. So all of this is now stacking up in my life. I just was like obedient, right? And I honored
sense.
God, and so I felt like this is okay. Um, the hardest part, I think the hardest one, was going to see my birth father in the hospital. He was dying. And my aunt, great lady, the only one that was safe or good to me, but we had been separated because of all of this stuff that she didn't even know about.
Mm.
Um, she called, she said, I know you haven't heard from me, but I want to let you know this is what's happening. And so my ex-husband, we weren't exes yet, but he was still in the picture. He said, do you want to go? I said, no, I don't. But you know what?
Mm.
I'm going to go, not for you, not for anybody, but for God, because this is the least I can do for all that he's done for me.
Yeah.
And so I went to the hospital, did the physical forgiveness, and my birth father couldn't speak at the time, and, tears rolling down his face. And somebody asked, well, are you going to come back and see him? Can we tell him you'll be back tomorrow? I said, no, you really can't tell him that.
Yeah.
And he passed away, but I felt like I did what I was called to do,
Yep.
but then I had my parameter. And
Mm.
so those were really key lessons in my healing, because it would help me down the road.
Yes.
Pain of divorce, pain of betrayal, even from Christian friends, pain from whatever. And so that's kind of where what I would call my entry level healing began.
Mm. That's good. And then, so you've lost your dad, you're in business, you're divorced. Where is God taking you next on this journey?
Well, God, in his grace, he is so amazing. He brought the most amazing human I've ever met into my life a couple years after that divorce. My husband, Ed. We've been
Mm.
married for 21 years.
That is awesome.
And yeah, it was just incredible, because here comes this 6'2" guy, just full of enthusiasm and energy. And a friend of ours had created a social situation for us to meet. And he practiced his proposal on the second date on a
Oh
napkin
my
at a
gosh. Oh my goodness.
And on the third date, out of nowhere, Bethany, I don't know where it came. Well, actually, I do. Holy Spirit, it just came out that I love you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I broke the rules, the zones, or whatever books were out about, relationships and what you do or don't tell, somebody.
Yeah.
And and then a few weeks later, we were engaged and got married 9 months after that.
Holy moly. So I know a girl is like, wait, Bethany asked this question, but how did she open up her heart again? How was she able to, even if this felt like a Holy Spirit moment, how did fear and anxiety and worry or the past not dictate this yes?
That's a great question. And all of that was there. The difference was, as you know, Ed and I, like, we connected very quickly. He was very honest and open, and unlike any other person, like, no agenda. When we would talk, it was just all positive, all good stuff, wanting to get to know each other. But you're right. In that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just gonna. I don't know if I can get married again. I don't know what if things don't work out. I had a lot of, not baggage so much. I had dealt with a lot of it, but I still had that concern about certain things. And I still felt broken because I was told in that marriage, it's all my fault, right?
Yeah.
I married a classic narcissist, so everything was on me if things weren't good.
Right.
And so with Ed, God really worked with me. I prayed into it. I had kept this little journal with kind of a silhouette figure, and I would pray every night before Ed came, Lord, if I'm meant to be married or partnered up, you choose that person. I do not want second best again. That was my fault. I want only what's from your table.
That's
And
good.
what he looks like and what he does doesn't matter. Just fill in the image that you want.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when Ed came along, it was better and greater than I could have anticipated. And I think by the time we were that third week at church, when I kind of whispered, "I love you," and he had been waiting. He didn't push or rush me. He just wanted it to be okay.
Yeah.
I asked God. I didn't ask. I told him. I said, "I'm feeling like I need to not be here because what if it's bad again?" And he spoke to my heart, and he said, "This man will not do what others have done to you, Andi. You
Wow.
need to stay, and it's going to be okay." And that's who I trusted in the relationship.
Gosh, I was literally just going to say that. That is awesome, Andi. I heard a sermon, I think it was last week at church, and it talked about how you cannot, in your brain, like the scientific part of it, you cannot have fear and faith at the same time. So fear is either going to take over or faith's going to take over. And I love what you just said, because the woman who's like, but I still don't understand how you trust. You didn't trust in him. You trusted in the Lord. You trusted in the one who's the Alpha, who's the Omega, who's the one that's writing your story. And when he gives you the green light, that's who you're trusting in.
Exactly.
So you're having faith that not that everything will be perfect, but you're having faith that this is directed by him.
Absolutely. And it was all about God bringing Ed and me together, not about any of the other stuff. And God doesn't give you half a cup. Okay. He gives you all of it, even if you can't see it. And I couldn't see it, but I believed it. I trusted it. I knew God never lies, or he wouldn't be God. You can't lie and be God. Absolutely. And so my simple faith, but my educated mind were kind of like, okay, we're just going to do this. And there were people that, were trying to break us up or not have us marry and all that. And we had a lot of adversity. But on that day, when we committed before God, it was beautiful. It was wonderful. It was perfect. And so, people say, wow, you were only dating a couple of weeks. I said, well, I dated my ex for 2 years and obviously did not know him. Okay. So it's about God designing that perfect partner for you, even if he doesn't or she doesn't, look like or sound like what you expect. I have friends that are like, well, I want this and I want that, like a grocery list. And I'm like, well, good luck with that.
I know that this isn't the topic, but can you speak into that a little bit more? If you were like being a mother or a sister to maybe the single gals out here that are like, but you don't understand, this is my list and it has to follow this. What would you say to her?
I would say, put the list down and ask God for his desire for your partner. Yeah. Because that's where doors will open. That's where the beauty of the perfect person for you. And I'm not saying there aren't more than one, like if somebody's spouse dies, there could always be someone. But in the beginning, like you said, for younger folks or people who are first time getting married, even if they're older, that has to be God's choice. Now, I did say, one, a decent job, because you have to be in this world, you need to be provided. But basically what I said was, man of God, man after God's own heart, first and foremost.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone who, it didn't matter if he had kids, didn't have kids. It didn't matter if we were going to have kids or not had kids. God already kind of told me what that was going to be like, what was going to happen. But I put, sense of humor, because humor gets you through a lot of the tough times. And then I just said, dancing's a plus, Lord, but it doesn't have to.
I love it.
That's
care about the desires of our heart, and there's dancing in heaven. So I'm a firm believer that dancing is important. So I would high five that one. I love it.
Yeah, high five on that one. And really, it was just simple. It was from a simple heart that just wanted to love and be loved. 100%, that I would be that treasure to someone, and I would have someone to treasure. Yep. And so that's what I would say, male, female, whatever, you need to let God get a blank page, get a blank journal, pray into it, pray that silhouette. Like there were times, I know people are going to think I'm crazy now, but it's okay. It won't be the first time. But Jesus and I would kind of shadow dance, and then I would imagine the silhouette of whoever he had designed for me. Sometimes there were a few times I was just so lonely. I just really wanted that experience. And I thought, I'm just going to put on a song and I'm just going to enjoy the moment. And I know when it's time. And God did confirm that I was meant to be partnered, because I directly asked many times, if I'm to be single or to be partnered.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Just let me know. And single is still partnered with Christ, but not, to a human.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I knew that I was meant to be partnered, and I had to be patient, which is really the hard part.
Yeah. I love the visual that you said earlier about the open hands, right? That you can't, if you had your hands closed, I see how that's like being weaved between all parts of your story, whether I'm supposed to be single or not, who it's going to be, what the list looks like. I think it's such a good reminder that all of us really need to have this posture of, wait a minute, God is big and he has the greatest plan of all for us. And if we have our hands open, as opposed to giving him the script or feeding him, what the story needs to look like, it's going to be greater than we can ever think, fathom, or imagine. But it's got to be in the posture of humility of, Lord, I trust what you put in here is what is going to be good for me.
Absolutely. Because as any dad would, okay.
That's good.
Sometimes he will let his children make their own choices and suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't mean you did a bad thing. It just means that, when I said that I wanted to marry the first time someone to show me the world, my simple heart meant like go places, like travel without, problems, or do things that I had never done, outside things or theater or whatever. But that blanket request, or that blanket desire, also left room for Satan to come in. Oh, you want to see the world? Because basically, my ex had some very perversive aspects to him, and that's all I'll say. So I learned things that I wish I had never seen or learned, or, got forced into. Yeah. And that's where I realized when you speak with the Heavenly Father, the Heavenly Daddy, he loves you so much. Just tell him your heart. Well, does it really matter if he has brown hair, black hair? Does it matter if he's short or tall? Really, we all have our preferences, but wouldn't we really rather have the very best partner that Jesus and God designed for us?
Amen. So good.
So that was a lot of faith right there when God brought Ed in, and Ed came from, he was very godly, and he just had this great sense of humor, and he didn't know hardly anything about my background, like the details, but he said very early on, before we were married, one night, he said, I don't know exactly what happened to you, everything that happened, but this is what I do know. I will always be there for you. I will never leave you, and I will always listen. And those two things, I use with the kids we rescue, because aren't those the best things to do? Be with someone and be truly intent on listening to them, not fixing the problem, not giving them Christianese, not giving them platitudes, just listening. And that has now played down the road. I'm just now really openly talking about my PTSD. And I've had like 9 traumatic brain injuries. I've had a lot of health issues, a lot of autoimmune things, heart attacks, whatever you name it. It's probably on the list.
Wow.
And yet God has stood with me. His breath has been mine through all of it. And when we're in the deep, deep part of pain, hurt, betrayal, anger, all of that, that's where he is. And I'm really excited to share a very special encounter at the conference this week. So it's going to be pretty amazing. And I think a lot of people will understand more about what Jesus and what God and what Holy Spirit really want for us, especially if we've been broken, we've been tainted, we've had any of that in our life.
So true. And the conference that Andi is referring to, I know all of y'all can't come. I think that there's actually going to be a digital link. So maybe you could view that. I'll make sure that that's in the show notes. I'll check on that. But for people that are local in Corvallis, Oregon, it's going to be at Mid-Valley Willamette, it's through Mid-Valley Women of Christ, but it's at Life Community Church. It's going to be at 7 p.m., doors open at 6 p.m. And we get to hear Andi speak and share more on that. Also, girl, I hear there's a book coming out. So how can we purchase that from you?
Okay. My first book is on Amazon already. It's A Fragile Thread of Hope, One Survivor's Quest to Rescue. So if you go to Amazon.com, you can get the ebook or paperback, and 45% of proceeds go back to victims of child abuse and child sex trafficking. It's a little bit of my story, and then 4 stories of 4 of the teens we rescued off the street. Not all of them were trafficked, but why they're choosing the streets. Kids are running to the streets because they feel it's safer than what they're running from, which is a whole nother topic and a whole nother deal. Our newest book, Voices Against Trafficking, The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One. I am so excited. It will be coming out. If it's not out tomorrow or the next day, it'll be out very soon. You're going to go to Amazon.com. And this is going to give people an insight. There are 20 chapters by 20 top voices from all different aspects. A couple of survivor leaders like myself have written chapters. I've written one on PTSD. We have media members about the role of media. We have people from Texas, people from Mexico, all of these individuals and organizations that are frontliners that are really trying to get the awareness and education out about what is really happening and what does this mean. And to your point, Bethany, real quick, I wanted to just piggyback on you said about how people think it doesn't happen in their neighborhoods. That is a myth that we have to bust. Because here's the truth. Every 40 seconds in the United States, a child 18 and under is abducted.
Wow.
Okay, they are taken. Now, they may be lured by an advertisement, maybe, come be a model or, come mow lawns or come babysit or, whatever it is. However, they're luring the kids, but they are taken not by choice, by deception and by force. So every 40 seconds, think about how long this podcast has been. How many kids have gone missing already?
Holy moly, that's crazy. And I'm a parent. I have 2 teenagers. So from a parent's perspective, how could we guide our children in walking through their community? Is there something that they could be doing or looking for signs for something happening that they don't even know what's happening? What would that look like?
That would start with a conversation, one about the topic, if they're old enough to understand that. And it's not just stranger danger. As they get older, you've got internet chat rooms, a lot of other things to compete with. And we have a couple of great chapters on tips for parents regarding gaming and all of that. So one of the things I suggest is, one, do you have a safe word? Does your family unit, whatever that looks like, have a safe word or phrase that, let's say your teenager texted you, maybe they're going out in a group for the first time or on a date for the first time, or they're going, on a trip with their sports team or something. Do they have a phrase or word that they can text you or have a friend text you that lets you know they're in danger or they're uncomfortable? Okay. Because for girls, they might feel a little more compelled to go along sometimes, than the guys, because they want to be popular or they want to have a boyfriend. But we need to give them tools that can let you know, no matter what's happening, one, you're not going to judge them for whatever it is, and 2, that you're going to take it very seriously if they send that to you. So that's one simple thing. Another thing for parents, single or married parents that have maybe multiple jobs, which a lot of people do these days, have a safe advocate, a safe an adult whether it's a family member or a neighbor or someone that you've vetted, okay, that's very important to check out who you're leaving your kids with or asking someone, to watch your kids. But we want to make sure that that person is also aware of what to do. Also, do you have an escape plan from your apartment, your house, your trailer, whatever you are living in? Is there a plan if somebody comes in or somehow is let in, innocently maybe, and then something happens? Do you have a way for your kids to get out in a desperate measure? Now, people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But if you're prepared,
that's good.
Kids understand the preparation and it's for their safety. If they understand, oh, mom's not being police dog. She just wants to make sure I'm okay.
Right.
Okay. With our kids that we've rescued, it's like, are you with someone who's safe for you? Mm-hmm. And they were always very honest about it. Yes, or I'm not sure. Okay, then where are you going? I just want to know in case you need me. Yeah. Do whatever you want to do, but I just would like to know to make sure you're safe. That's okay. Good. So by opening the conversations, which is partly why this book is what this book will do, it will give parents and readers a chance to figure out, gosh, maybe I do need to have this conversation, or maybe I do need to find out more. And then in your local community, if you voted for a school board person or for a mayor or for a council person, what are they doing to protect your children in the community?
That's good.
How many prosecutions of predators have they had? Because we know the predators live everywhere.
Yeah.
So those are things that you can do on the simple level. And then, of course, we're happy to provide more information, but go to voicesagainsttrafficking.com. There's going to be a whole list of helplines and hotlines, from suicide prevention hotlines to national trafficking, human trafficking hotlines, child abuse hotlines, alcohol, drug. We want to give everyone the tools, at the very least, they can put in their phone, and then give those numbers to children, the responsible age children, who can also put them in their phone if they see something or if they're in trouble. But if you do see something and your gut says, boy, that just doesn't look right, please say something. Go somewhere appropriate, make a call, take a discreet, pretend you're doing a selfie, right? You might get the license plate, or you might get the person, as long as it looks natural. Those are things you can do. But somebody is begging God right now that they will be rescued, that somebody will find them, that somebody will pray for their safety, and that they will live long enough to tell their story.
Wow, Andi, thank you so much just for that wisdom and that reminder that while it seems scary, and sometimes I think we want to just cover our ears and pretend it isn't happening, being prepared is so, so valuable and can save lives. And maybe someone's heart is, how do I help? How do I help in this situation? This feels like such a big category. Is there ways to help, Andi?
Absolutely. 2 ways. The first one is very quick and easy. Go to voicesagainsttrafficking.com. There's a button that says join us. And all you have to do is put add your voice in the subject line, and then give us your name. We are trying to get 1 million names on our roster by the end of 2023, because when you have a roster of 1 million people or organizations that want to stop trafficking and they want legislators to do more, people will listen. And so that's one easy thing. It's free. And if they want to help support the educational programs and the virtual international conferences we have, there's a way to do that too. The second part is, if you'd like to help us with the 16 girls that we've rescued, we would gladly appreciate any financial donation. With the pandemic, it's been tough, but these gals are doing what they need to do. And you could go to beulasplace.org, my shelter, BEULAHS place.org, beulasplace.org, and there's a donate button. And that will help us provide education, housing, things like that for them.
I love that. And for those of you that are maybe driving or taking care of laundry or cooking and you didn't get that written down, no problem. We've got you covered in the show notes or at bringingherhope.com. Andi, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your vulnerability. I love the beauty in your redemption story, that while life was super hard and you dealt with abuse and all these things, God has taken those situations and now you get to pour out into not only kids and women and businesses and all sorts of things. But God is using your story for his glory. He never wastes anything, not even the pain.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's a great point. He does not waste anything. I mean, it'd be great if no one had pain, but look what Jesus went through.
Yep. Yep. So true. And I'm super excited that we're going to see each other in person. And
I know. And I hope all of you who can come will come, because I have a feeling God's going to shake the rafters.
He sure is. Again, that is November 12th. It's going to be a Friday night, Life Community Church in Corvallis, Oregon. Doors open at 6 p.m. It's free, by the way. We didn't mention that. It's free. You can come worship and hear this beautiful woman continue to share her wisdom and preach a good word. I know that it will be. So thank you, Andi, again for your time. And I look forward to seeing you in just a few days.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.